strange. Head of drama series for Amazon Studios, and I've been at the company about 2.5 years. I'm delighted that we've got 3 of our showrunners with us today. Jonathan Shapiro is a longtime collaborator with David Kelly. He's written on shows like Boston Legal and The Practice. He's a former federal prosecutor, which makes him very qualified to write on a law show. And he's a novelist. He just completed a book that's out. And right now we're in production on a new legal thriller that he and David Kelly created called Goliath, and it stars Billy Bob Thornton. It'll be out later this year. So welcome, Jonathan. Ben Watkins over here is a former actor turned writer-producer, so it can happen. He went on staff at Burn Notice as a staff writer and worked his way up through the ranks. You were there the entire run,
That's right.
Right? 7 years?
7 seasons, yeah.
So he ended as an executive producer, and today he's the executive producer, creator, and showrunner of Hand of God, which is in production on its 2nd season. It's a show that stars Ron Perlman and Dana Delaney. I think there were some fans in the audience, I heard, yeah. And last but not least is Graham Yost. Graham is a super seasoned TV writer and producer. He's best known for, great series like, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, The Americans, and Justified. And currently he is the executive producer and showrunner on our new series about a con artist called Sneaky Pete. It stars Giovanni Ribisi and is inspired by the life of Bryan Cranston. I guess I can say that, right? And they just started production last week, so we're super fortunate to have Graham here in Texas. So we'll kick off and talk a little bit about what it's like to do drama series in a sort of on-demand environment. And I guess I'll just throw this one out, to any of you guys to just get started. How do you think about writing and breaking stories, differently for a streaming service like Amazon? Is it different than the broadcast or, kind of traditional cable shows that you've worked on?
Yeah, I would say for sure. I mean, for me, and even seeing the difference between season 1 and season 2, thinking about how people are actually going to be viewing it, if they're going to see it all in one chunk, all the episodes are coming together. There's a good chance someone's going to watch episode 2 and then 30 seconds later be watching episode 3, and it can change how you end episodes, how you start episodes, not worrying about when is the commercial break coming. When on Burn Notice, loved Burn Notice, but you would do an episode and there would be times where you would have a really powerful, what you would call an act break right before a commercial, and you would get a note back saying, well, we want to end on our main character, because that's just something that they're used to doing. That's part of the routine, and you do not have to worry about that when you're doing a show that you can just run all the way through, see the entire narrative all the way through. So that was one of the big changes, and it sort of it frees you up a little bit.
Jonathan?
The novel is available on Amazon. Should maybe mention it. I agree completely with what Ben's saying. It's the flow of the narrative is totally different. It's more like writing a novel in that each chapter better lead to the person continuing to read. So each chapter of the series better lead them to press the button to watch the next episode. So we're sort of getting back to the old-time cliffhanger, the need to really force the audience, make it impossible. I think you gave me this note once, Morgan, which is make it impossible for the audience to stop watching.
And so when you're breaking your story, do you work backwards from that cliffhanger? Do you think about where you want to end? Do you start there and figure out the rest of your episode, or does it come about more organically?
Unlike any other show I ever worked on, we started with the final image of the first season and have worked back in a reverse engineer to the front, which is great because then you realize...
Speak up the mic.
No. Yes, of
Yeah.
course. Hi, I have a novel on Amazon.
it requires a level of detail in your planning that, I think makes for better storytelling, but it involves a lot more forward thinking.
Graham, we've talked about this in terms of how you and the writing staff on Sneaky Pete are thinking about the architecture of the season. You're working on a really complicated con show. You're working backwards from a long con, and how does that work? You've talked about kind of going back and sometimes seeding different things. What's the process that you guys have gone through?
Well, it's like any show, you're building an airplane in flight, so it's already taken off. Now we've started shooting, or we can use the other one. The train is rolling down the tracks, and we're still building the train and laying the tracks, and whatever ridiculous metaphors I can use. But the difficulty with doing this con show is, as you said, trying to figure out how it's going to end. We don't have exactly the ending. We've got a target, but then we start to get closer. It's like, oh, that's cool, but now we have to go back to episode 2 and set that up. So it's, we're trying to get as far ahead as we can so that we have the freedom to go back and set things up, or say, it turns out we don't need that. We can pull that out of that scene. But it's really, it's a fascinating thing. And in terms of no act breaks, you came into the room, and when I was pitching loosely the first season, and we had up on a board 1 episode, and we had it broken into acts, and you said, we don't have acts. And it's like, we what? Because as writers, we still do have acts. We're looking for a certain structure for the episode. But as has been said, trying to find that cliffhanger that will keep people watching, so that they stay up all night and lose their job and ruin their family because they're hooked on a show, which I think is great. That's great we're doing that.
It seems in some ways it's almost easier perhaps to, write a traditional legal show, for example, where it's closed-ended. That, the case resolves by the end of the episode, and you need 5 or 6 big plot points, and you kind of reverse engineer everything from that. Is it harder in some ways when you don't have those impositions of structure on the writing?
Well, it's liberating because you have to make them laugh, make them cry, but most of all, make them wait. Right? This was what Charles Dickens did. This is what you do with a serialized novel. You got to just keep them engaged. And frankly, the closed-ended episodes on network got a little bit boring to write because you knew you were going to have to end there. I have to tell a quick TV story about this reverse engineering. I don't know if anybody saw the show Life, which was on NBC with Damian Lewis, and it was a great show. I really enjoyed it, worked on it the whole time it was on the air. But it was this very complicated conspiracy reveal. And so we got hired and we walked into the writer's room, and the pilot ended with this board with all these pictures and lines drawing, and you realize, oh my God, we don't know what any of this means, but this is the conspiracy. So we've all taken the job, and Rand Ravitch, who created it, closes the door and says, all right, here's the problem. The set decoration guy put that together, and we thought it looked really cool, and we have no idea what any of it means.
Yeah.
And the door was locked, and you couldn't go and take that other job. And it was, sometimes, as Graham said, you have to go back and finagle what you already have to make it work.
And how is the process of, kind of thinking about a season changed by doing fewer episodes? We do 10. That's sort of our standard. Cable did 13. You probably did 13 on Burn Notice.
We did
right?
as many as 18 for quite a few seasons there.
And in broadcast, you would do 22, sometimes 24 episodes. So it's is that how do you think about the amount of story to try and tell, or, what's the expectation for the audience in terms of, Graham, what they can expect over the, course of 10 hours?
Well, I think what's one great thing about 10 hours is that you have a better shot at telling one big complete story, that you're not going to be pulled in so many different directions, and it's also not going to kill the writer's room. Where we're doing Sneaky Pete on the Culver Studios, where we're writing it in LA, they were also doing Limitless, and one of the writers from Justified, Taylor Elmore, was working on Limitless last year, and they did 22, I think, and we'd see him and we could just watch his slow, degradation over the course of the season, and especially when they get around episodes 16 and 17 and they're just running on fumes. They know how they want it to end, but there's hard times in there. And
That back nine was always a blessing and a curse.
yeah,
for people, right?
the upside is we're just crafting 10. The downside is they all better really work. There's no sort of episode you can just kind of, we'll get them the week after. Every episode counts.
Yeah, it was jarring for me, having worked on a show where you do 18 episodes and Burn Notice had a close-ended premise with a serial element. So every season there was always going to be some time where you would start to feel the lag, and in terms of generating story, and you almost felt like you were cheating every now and then in terms of extending that serialized element, because we would have a great ending we knew we were building to, and we'd have a great kickoff, but then at some point you would feel a little drag, and I just was used to that. And so when you go to 10 episodes, all of a sudden I had the reverse problem with so much story. And then all of a sudden you're wondering what to pull out and how to scale back if you're pushing story forward, because it can't all be packed in. And that was a little bit jarring because I was used to being in positions where you had to come up with something else. And now all of a sudden you're having to make really hard choices about which really cool elements or story points are you going to have to scale back or pull out.
There's a lot of talk about, peak TV, or, there are 400 scripted shows being made. How do you, as showrunners and creators, when you go into a writing room, how do you factor that into what you're doing creatively? Because it's never been harder in some ways to stand out and break out. What does that mean in terms of the writing process? Jonathan?
Well, there are times that we wish maybe one of the lawyers had a superpower or could maybe shoot fire from his eyes, because you're talking about trying to get attention in a incredibly crowded media market. And we're hoping, I think Amazon is hoping, that we'll be that little piece of the puzzle that's quality, right? It may not have lawyers that fly, but this will be the best 21st century law thriller John Grisham show you'll ever see.
And it might be worth just taking a second to talk about, Goliath, because we went straight to series on this. This has not been through the traditional Amazon pilot process, so we haven't had a chance to, share anything about Goliath like we did with Hand of God or Sneaky Pete. Give a little teaser of what's to come.
Well, you didn't go direct to series because it's a Jonathan Shapiro show. You went direct series because it's a David Kelly show, and it's David Kelly, arguably from LA Law to The Practice to Boston Legal to Ally McBeal, is, I think, the greatest sort of writer of these kinds of shows. And we wanted to do the story of Goliath since 1999. We just could never do it on network television because we're going to follow one major case, conspiracy and thriller, and we just couldn't do that in the formats we had. And I think because of the quality, I'll say, of the writing of David Kelly, because it would be uncouth to say it was me, because it wasn't. We attracted, William Hurt, Billy Bob Thornton, Maria Bello, Olivia Thirlby, just a tremendous cast. And, I think that's the other piece of it. A show like Goliath, which I think will shock people, that Amazon, which I understand is a corporation, is letting us do a very controversial story that will, I think, offend, shock, please a lot of people. And we've had total artistic freedom to do it.
So there's, Jonathan's mentioning, this, stars and Goliath. Graham and Sneaky Pete, we have Bryan Cranston and Giovanni Ribisi and a bunch of other really great actors. How important do you think stars like that are today in terms of helping to get your show sampled and noticed?
I mean, it's incredibly important. And one of the big changes, because we'll be honest, Sneaky Pete was originally shot as a pilot for CBS, and CBS passed, and you guys took a look. and the big change that happened between the CBS version and your version is that Bryan Cranston now appears in the show. And I've known Bryan, we worked together on From the Earth to the Moon back almost 20 years ago now. As I say, I knew him when he was lowercase, before he became Bryan Cranston, you know? And he, you know, that's important. You know, you can just see it when you're talking to people. Oh, it's Giovanni Ribisi. Oh, yeah, I love him. Margot Martin. Oh, she was great. That was great. Bryan Cranston. Really? You know, and that, to get through the volume, because you have 400 shows. I mean, we were just over watching the West Wing panel, and someone mentioned there that at their peak, they were getting 19 million viewers.
Amazing.
You know, one of the last great full-on network shows. Now, there were a few after, obviously The Good Wife and such, but no one gets that anymore. And so it's so fragmented, you're hoping that in your category, you become people's favorites. When we were doing Justified, I'd run into people who either they watched it and it was their favorite show and they loved it, or people would say, "What's FX?" And they didn't know what FX was. And what number is that? It's like, I would actually get into a conversation, well, what system are you on? Well, on Dish, it's, you know, it's like, oh, give it up.
You know, that is something, that's my mantra we talk about all the time. We have to fight to be your favorite show because, you know, it is so competitive. It is, you know, you have to jump through a few extra steps to access Hand of God. And so therefore, you got to really make sure that you're going to deliver and the audience that shows up loves it.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely loves it.
I mean, yeah, which is all true. And one of the things that, for me, thinking about coming up with a show, you can't really start from the point of how is it going to break through or what's going to be the sort of signature element that might grab attention. Because the math just becomes too complicated. I just feel like what you want to do is start with something really honest that you feel like you can really commit yourself to telling that story. And I think those are the kinds of things that eventually they will have staying power. Because there are a lot of examples of shows that come out with the splash that might have the gimmick or might have the star, but don't have the staying power. And then now you have these days where there are shows with big stars that don't even register a blip at times. So if you know that's the risk you're taking with all this content that's out there right now, you really got to commit yourself to something that you really believe in. And I think that the honesty and the sincerity of a show and a story comes through, and that is what people end up latching onto. That can give them more staying power when you're dependent on word of mouth, when you're dependent on the people who really love the show wanting to spread the word about the show. I think you really need that.
Well, Hand of God is an interesting example of that too, because you wrote it on spec,
Yeah.
right? You dreamed it up. Talk a little bit about the development process and why you were so inspired to do this, and why, you know, this was the show that was burning a hole in your gut to make and write.
Well, I mean, it was really a great sort of eye-opening Hollywood experience for me, because I came off of a show that was on USA that was very palatable and digestible and fun. It had good characters, but it also had explosions and stunts and fights. And I had a meeting with my representatives and my agents, and they're all saying, "Hey, let's do something that's gonna, keep tied into the burn notice, category that you have, and sort of expands the envelope." And so I'm working on all these ideas and all these pitches that sort of fit that. And that's what I mean about doing the math. I'm doing the math. I'm saying, well, here's a good idea, nice character, and there's going to be enough bombs in here, there's going to be some action. And meanwhile, every morning I'm waking up with this idea that's been on my mind for a while, which, is I want to do a modern day telling about a character who's a zealot and how that affects the people around him. And eventually it just kept on my brain to the point where I just told my agents, I said, listen, we've got all these pitches we're getting ready to take out that you guys think are gonna sell, but I don't wanna do it. I want to actually sit down and write a script about an idea that I would never be able to go pitch. And to their credit, they said, based on that passion, great. And they supported that. I wrote the script, and I put it in a drawer. I finished Burn Notice, and as soon as that was done, I came out and I gave them the script, and I was thinking, here's what's gonna happen. They're gonna say, this is some crazy ass shit. It'll be a great sample. It'll definitely let everybody know that you can do more than burn notice, but it's not going to happen. Instead, they were like, let's go. And you know, we got a director involved, a world-class director who had never done TV, in Mark Forster. And he read it, jumped on board, and then we got Ron Perlman involved. And this is a guy who has got an incredible pedigree, incredible resume, and had a bunch of choices in front of him. But he recognized that TV is where the most exciting work is really happening right now. So he was looking for a project in TV, and this was the one he chose.
To me, this is one of the most exciting new developments about the TV industry, that people write spec scripts like you did, and then they package them up, and then you get to go around town and say, this is it, this is the vision, do you want to make it or do you not? In our case, we said, all right, we're in. And, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Graham, like, that didn't really exist. Everybody was stuck going through the normal development process, and is this allowing people to take pure shots or do more, real passion projects? I mean, clearly it seems like it is.
Well, I think it is. I was on a panel at the WGA a couple of years ago, and someone was saying back in the day as a writer, you would write a spec cop show, spec legal, spec medical, and just to show that you could do the three categories. And now, when I'm staffing a show, I don't read spec scripts. You're just reading original pilots. You want to see what that person wants to write if they had their choice of whatever show they could do. And because nothing applies, what kind of spec do you do if you're going to try and staff on The Walking Dead or Sneaky Pete or Hand of God or Goliath? I mean, they're all so idiosyncratic that I think that that just reflects that the fact that there are so many different kinds of shows on now. And for someone who's been doing this, and I love your setup, which makes me feel like I'm 900 years old, I swear to God, I went from young punk to wily old veteran in about a minute. But I have been around long enough to recognize that as a writer, this is the promised land. Now there are difficulties. You're not going to get 19 million viewers, but so what? You get to do these shows. And, everyone who's maybe got a crazy idea that, that 20 years ago no one would have even thought of it. You wouldn't even thought of writing it. No one's ever going to do that show. Now it can be done. And that's pretty remarkable.
To that point, Jonathan, and I remember when I was a young executive, people would just submit countless samples of the practice, to be considered for staffing, to Graham's point. And there have been a lot of legal shows done, for example. There's been a lot of everything done at this point. 400 shows. We have catalogs of hundreds and hundreds of shows available on Amazon or Netflix. How hard is it to come up with stories that feel really new and fresh that we haven't seen before?
Well, what you were saying about your process and what Graham was saying, I think the more specific you can be in your storytelling in this day and age, the more general its appeal, if that makes any sense. I think what people are desperate for in our politics and our show business is authenticity, something genuine. So David and I talked about the fact that we hadn't really seen a law show that we were engaged in. And we didn't really see a law show that was addressing the kind of issues we used to address on Boston Legal or The Practice. And so we said, well, let's do that. And so it wasn't hard for us because we knew, as Ben knew and as Graham knows, we knew exactly what it is we wanted to say. I could not possibly write a closed-ended law show like The Practice again, because I won't say which episodes, but I told the same story in 3 separate episodes of 3 different shows. I mean, that's, it isn't that complicated, right? So I agree. I think it's just a wonderful time for storytellers because you get to now tell the stories that they would never let you tell. That's the good part. The bad part is then when it fails, you just suck, because that now it's all on you. Yeah.
Graham, as a leader, what's the hardest part about running a show?
Getting them to address me as master. They just, they kind of rebelled at that one. I don't know. I started being a showrunner back in a show for NBC called Boomtown, which is 15, 16 years old. And when that was put on the air, given the order, they made sure that your friend Chris Brancato and Bert Salke were there to back me up in case I either got hit by a truck or proved incapable of doing the job. And as it turned out, it was like, well, actually, I like doing the job. And in terms of being a leader, it's really sort of, whatever that means, it's really having at least a fixed point that you're trying to get to, and then navigating that, and most of the time it's saying, yes, let's do that and not that, and then having the flexibility to 2 days later in the room say, that, not that, no, we're going to do that. That is the right way to go. I've been really lucky to get just an amazing writing staff on Justified, and several of them have come over onto Sneaky Pete, so we have a familiarity, and yeah. I mean, that's, on Justified, our goal was always, let's do a show that Elmore Leonard likes, and then hope everyone else follows in behind that. On Sneaky Pete, we want to do a really fun, smart...
That Morgan likes.
That Morgan likes. And that Amazon Prime subscribers love. And that then they decide to order big items through the Amazon website. So that's what we're putting in every episode. It's like, boy, I wish I could get a new barbecue. And someone says,
but
get it on Amazon. But we made it very realistic in the show. So it doesn't feel like we're pandering at all.
Talk a little bit about, Sneaky Pete and where it's going up. Obviously the pilot was up. Maybe some people, had a chance to see it. It obviously did very well. We ordered it, but you've, kind of made some shifts. Give not too much, but maybe just a taste of what's to come.
Well, I think the big thing is that, because it was originally a CBS show, it felt like it might be more con of the week. And we decided we wanted to come up with some big cons for the whole season, as well as within the going forward, getting to that there's stuff that happens along the way. Wow, that's the most simplistic version of storytelling. We want things to happen along the way. Really? That's original.
I want to write that down.
Yeah, write that down. Things must happen along the way. Again, that's how you be a leader. You say that, stuff like that.
Master class of writing.
Yeah, listen, like anything, one of the words, Morgan, you used is don't forget this is premium, and so it's digging into the characters and who they are and why they are what they are and what they do and that kind of thing, and spending a little more time with that instead of just having it be story. So that's been one of our big goals from the beginning.
And what about Brian and his role in the season?
Well, Brian, when I don't know if that was his idea or your idea to have him be part of the show, but it fit in perfectly that he's the bad guy of the season. And it's fun. I was joking to him on set that I haven't written any lines for him in 20 years, but it's fun to write for him again. And that gives us sort of the sense of, okay, this is the season about Vince, and hopefully there are second and seasons and on down the road, and you have to find that sort of big bad. And we did that on Justified. Margot Martindale was our big bad in season 2, and that's sort of a good thing because it's like a novel then. You're trying to do that story that year. But Brian's a producer also in his first time really producing, and he's having a great time.
Before we open to the audience for some questions, I just want to ask each of you, and Ben, I'll start with you. In case there are any aspiring writers out there who want to, create and run TV shows, now that you've done it, now that you've established yourself, what kind of advice do you have for people who are trying to do the same thing that you guys have done or are doing?
Well, I think that the first thing you have to do, you have to start. Everybody has a story. 100% has a story. As soon as you actually put that story down on paper, you've separated yourself from most everyone. And the more specific you get, the better chance you have of actually having something come of it. And I think as writers, for me, one of the breakthroughs was just realizing I'm going to just tell the story the best way I know how, according to the instincts. And this happened over and over again. You will find yourself faced with choices where you'll say, well, what do you think the reader would want? And then what is your gut telling you to do? And it was a big breakthrough for me when I started just saying, no, I'm going to follow my gut. And again, that just comes down to the honesty. If the material is honest, it will break through. And when you talk about whether or not you want to run a show or not, that's a whole different question, because that has so much to do with managing money and managing personalities and dealing with stress and pressure. And you really, you hear all these stories when you're coming up about how hard it is. And I heard all these stories, and I was just full of piss and vinegar. I was like, this is going to be a breeze. And it's not. It is. You feel.
I actually think it's one of the hardest jobs on the planet.
It is like
the skills that you have to combine in one role is unbelievable.
And it's all under this incredible time constraint and all this pressure, and you have all these people looking at you, and then you're trying to protect something that is precious. So for me, I really liken it to like you're this vehicle in in Road Warrior, right? So you start the movie and you've got all this armor and all this weaponry, and you've got all these tight ass rims and these big tires, and then you start going through the movie. And then all the way through the movie, you're losing shit. You lose a side panel, you lose your machine gun, you lose your rims, then you lose a steering wheel, and all you're hoping for by the end of this season is that you're still alive and the car is still running. It could look completely different, but it's still running. If you can pull that off, you've had a successful season.
Jonathan?
That's great. I've been the showrunner on 4 shows, 3 of my own, and I came in to run another show. And you need all the skills you talked about, and you have to also have the skills of running an Applebee's. In that, I don't know that anyone grows up wanting to run an Applebee's, but someone has to. Because if the Applebee's that you're running doesn't work out, they need to fire someone. And you're serving food that people may not really want to eat.
You're really taking this metaphor to the end.
Oh, I haven't gotten to the appetizer menu. And, you have the job of being the head writer, but you also have the job of dealing with the personalities. In my first show, I made the mistake of saying to the crew, and by the way, I'm an attorney, and so if any of you have any legal questions, I'd love to help out in any way I could. And the first call I got at 3 a.m. that someone on our lighting crew had been arrested, I thought, oh, this is a huge mistake. So I will manfully say, having run shows, that I always try to avoid the job. I think it's a terrible job. David Mamet said that writing a play is like running a marathon, writing a television show is like running till you're dead. And
this is not very inspiring.
But now here's the good side. My wife, Betsy Bournes, who wrote on Roseanne for 3 years and wrote on Friends and wrote Smelly Cat and ran a show that she produced with Will Smith, is great at it. And here's why, and I think probably Graham and Ben have this too. She's a really nice person who cares about people's feelings, and know that you have to work in collaboration with one another in a way that everyone feels heard and cared about and listened to. I'm not that guy, so.
Graham,
well,
this is fun, right?
I don't want to
Is
fall.
this fun?
What do you say to young writers starting out is just don't. I don't know how many years I've got left in this business, but I don't want any more people coming up behind me. There's a whole panel today for first-time showrunners, and I said, boy, it'd be terrible if there was something catastrophic to happen on that panel. Because they're going to become looking for my job in a couple years, and enough. No, I mean, it's what Ben said, and you find something that you really believe in, and that'll get you a long way. Yeah, being a showrunner, it is a tough job. I remember we were doing Boomtown, and the same floor, they were doing Mr. Sterling, and Lawrence O'Donnell was running that show. And we met each other in the bathroom. That's all I'll say. But that's all I'll say. That suggests something far more. We're standing at the urinals, and he said, "This is the worst job in the world." And I was thinking, wow. And I said, yeah, it's really tough. But inside I was thinking, oh, I'm sorry, man, because this is the best job I've ever had. And I loved it. I loved doing Boomtown. But there are times when it is the worst job in the world. And I was saying to someone on Justified, I've got short-cycled bipolar, because in the morning it'd be, I love this. This is great. The room's going great. In the afternoon, something happens. It's like, I hate this. Oh, my God, I hate this more than anything. So it's you have to be, patient and be lucky enough to stick with it.
That was great. How about some questions from the audience? Right here.
Hi, you guys have made some of my all-time favorite shows. So my question is for you.
Talk to them.
Has Amazon picked up anything through the open submission process?
We have.
And what do you guys look for as far as any tips on how to stand out?
I mean, to answer your question, yes, one of our standout kid series, Gordon McGibbon's Life on Normal Street, came through the open submission process, and it's done terrific. It's a great show. There's a movie that is about to go, into production that came in through the open submission, process too, and now has a major feature filmmaker director attached to it. So, it's alive and well. It's hard, but all of this is hard. And I'd go back to what Ben said and just write something that you think is really honest and accurate and unique. I think more than anything today, as we think about, what we're going to do and how we position our service to be different from other networks or shows out there, is like, what is really distinct? What doesn't feel like it's, a piece of real estate that's already being occupied, by other shows? What does, what does that writer have to say? What's, percolating up inside of him or her that is just dying to get out? And, what is the truthfulness of that? And I think that's, that's the things that, should guide you as a creator. Right here.
Hi, my name is Trisha, and I am a film and TV professor, and for the last 2 years I've taught a class called HBO, Netflix, and Amazon. And one of the questions that my students ask, and I'm not really sure that I have a good answer for this, so I'm hoping you guys can explain it to me, is why did Amazon ever decide to get into the business of original content development? Is it trying to be the next Netflix? Is it trying to just garner more Prime subscribers in the hopes that that will indeed translate into the purchasing of more barbecues? I guess I'm just wondering what was like the financial...
The company got into the streaming business about almost 10 years ago. And, it was a natural thing for Amazon to do. People were already interacting or transacting with, Amazon, and, providing them movies and TV shows was a very natural thing to do. And that business was, humming along and doing fine. It's a huge library. There's lots of stuff. And in doing research on, what Amazon customers really wanted, they thought there was a lot of value in that. So we started to make that part of the Prime service that, maybe you're a subscriber of. And as we got into doing that, I think the company learned the same thing that companies like HBO and Showtime learned a long time ago. It's great to have movies, it's great to have, other older series, but to really stand out and to really distinguish your brand, you have to have original content. And that is what led to, the creation of Amazon Studios and the creation of all these, great shows that we're attempting to do. And yes, we're certainly trying to entertain and, attract, customers. And, it's worked out, it's worked out really well so far. Hopefully we're going to, do a lot more and, have your next favorite show. And that's the opportunity and the challenge.
I have a question for the showrunners. How does episode release strategy affect your writing in terms of like flow between the episodes or arcs for your characters? If you understand that customers are watching, like they might binge through a season in 1 week, or they watch 3 episodes one after the other.
For me, that changed 2 things the most. I think as Jonathan and Graham have talked about being able to write more narratively and continuously, that was one thing. But I realized as we started thinking about how was the next episode going to start, it actually freed us up because if I knew you had to wait a week to watch the next episode and then you hadn't seen the last episode for a week, then I would feel more obligation to sort of set it up. But knowing that you're going to be watching this next episode within the next 10 to 30 seconds actually allowed us to have some fun in terms of, sometimes it would be a direct continuation. Sometimes it would be a 180 tonal shift. And so, and that was a lot of fun as a writer to be able to do that. The other thing that I've found, and I feel like is a bonus, and there's some drawbacks to the binge model, but one of the things I think is a bonus, and it really, I had a theory about it, and it definitely proved true, is like people will binge it, they will watch it, and you can do something small that happens in episode 6 that is tied to something that happened in episode 2, and they can go back and watch that immediately. Or if something pops into their head and they're saying, wait, oh, did I see that? Did I see something about that in the pilot? They can go back and watch that immediately. In fact, we've seen a lot of people that go back and watch the entire series again. And then you get a little more satisfaction out of the things you put in that you thought only you were going to notice, or that were for your own amusement, that the audience is actually picking up on and the audience is actually getting the satisfaction from.
Somebody, right there.
Hi, I'm Anthony. I was curious if you guys have heard a lot of pitches from the so-called heavy hitters. Like, I know you guys got something from David E. Kelly, I think, also coming up, but just curious.
That's the show that Jonathan is doing.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm a big David Kelly
Yeah.
fan, so just curious who else you've heard of, who else has made pitches besides David Kelly, like in the so-called heavy hitter producer world?
Well, we've got 2 new pilots that are, coming out next Friday, June 17th. One is based on F. Scott Fitzgerald's last unfinished novel called The Last Tycoon. It's, exploration of Hollywood in the 1930s, and it was written and directed by Billy Ray, who's a fantastic, feature writer-director. He's known for things like Captain Phillips, and I think he wrote one of the Hunger Games, movies. He's a terrific talent. We are doing another pilot based on a best-selling book that was out about 3 years ago called The Interestings, and we had Mike Newell, come on board and direct that, who's a just big-time filmmaker who's done Harry Potter, everything from Harry Potter films to romantic comedies. He's absolutely fantastic, and so those will drop next Friday, and I hope everybody has a chance to watch those and help us to decide what to pick up. And then we just picked up 4 other really big pilots that were announced about a week ago. One from Amy Sherman Palladino, who created the Gilmore Girls. It's a really fun period soap with a great character at the center of it. We picked up a really big fantasy thriller from Guillermo del Toro called Carnival Row, which is a really gigantic, fun world to try and bring to television. And then Matt Charman, who was nominated for an Academy Award this year for writing Bridge of Spies, did an adaptation of a terrific science fiction novel called Strange New Things. And we're going to be doing that too coming up. So, all really fun stuff. Yeah, over here.
Hello.
Whoa.
Sorry.
Oh, you didn't need a mic.
I guess not. One of the things that I love about your distribution platform on Amazon is that you don't necessarily have like a target demographic because it's on demand, so you can, you guys have such different programming. I think it's fantastic. So with that being said, is there anything that you specifically seek out? Like, are you looking at the programs that you have and saying, we have a void here, or we want to draw in this type of audience?
Yep. Well, I think the number one thing we're trying to do is ambitious adult television series that, stand out, that don't feel like other things that are on, television, that, come from, the very, best writers, creators, directors, producers, actors, so that it's really premium. I mean, that's really, a big standout for us, that it feels different than normal television, that it's somewhere between the best of what television offers and what movies are. And I think, in each of these cases, in each of these shows here, we're trying to not only really elevate the storytelling that these guys are doing, but also the filmmaking, so that they really do feel like little mini movies. That's super important as a basic. And then beyond that, we definitely have, certain targets. We have, one target that's it's a real sort of, prestige, kind of, play that's, things like, Transparent and, Mozart in the Jungle have been, kind of standouts in that regard. And then we have another big audience segment that is, really almost like a Comic-Con, kind of audience that loves sci-fi and fantasy and action and thrillers. And, Ben's show is certainly an, example of that. Sneaky Pete, touches on that. And then there are certain shows that, just combine, the best of both of those things. That's really the sweet spot if we can, kind of hit that sort of target that appeals to both. And beyond that, like, we feel liberated to just do things that we think are really smart and different and have the chance to, really connect. And again, hopefully, will be somebody's favorite show.
Hi, I'm Nikki.
Hi, Nikki.
Hello. I'm just curious if you've noticed a difference in numbers and like streaming viewership between your original content shows that you guys have created with the streaming model in mind as compared to shows that you've acquired that were created for broadcast. And I'm curious if you've noticed a difference in numbers between those two types of shows.
Sure, there's no question that, if shows are available everywhere and you've already seen them a bunch of times, it doesn't mean there's not an audience for them, and sometimes that can be really valuable. But to really define our service and to get people excited about showing up, you have to have great original, series. And that's why when, whether it's Hand of God or Man in the High Castle or Bosch, come on and, really plant a flagpole, they do unbelievably. And, it's not to say there's not audience for other shows, but, for really driving, audience and, building the brand, there's no question that the originals are the way to go. Down here?
Hi, I'm Amy, and I have a showrunner question. I had a very successful short film that was optioned by HBO, and I went through a development process. It was my first time writing for television. And I had a very famous director attached, and that person didn't work out, and so they passed, but they gave the project back to me. So I'm in the process of taking it out again, which has been really nice that I had that opportunity. But people like David Simon have said, you really need a showrunner. You need a partner who's a showrunner. And that's what I've heard, because I haven't done it before. And you need somebody like a heavyweight a little bit more so than you, that you can actually work on the creating of the pilot even together. I'm just wondering how that connection happens, because does it happen through an agent? Does it happen through a producer? How do you connect with showrunners, and that I have a project that I think is really unique, but I'm not really sure because I've been in the indie film world and mainly a documentary filmmaker before I became a writer. So,
I've been approached sometimes through my agent, sometimes, it was Joe Weisberg who created The Americans. We're at the same agency, and they were looking for someone to be a godfather on an idea he had. It wasn't The Americans; it was something before that. And I read his book and met with him, and off we went. I've been approached through the studio, where they have someone, they've got a project, and they've maybe got a writer, but they're looking for a showrunner to attach to it. And then other producers will come. So all of those things. It's, agents, studios, other producers.
Anybody else right here in the middle?
Hello. I'm Faye. My question is for Ben. I thought that all of the characters on Hand of God were just so compelling. And I'm wondering if any of the characters that you wrote for that show were based at all on anyone that you've ever known or met.
Most of the characters in that show are based on my family members. No, I think this is probably true for anyone. Those characters are based on me. They're based on people I know. They're based on people I've seen. Even if I start with an archetype or a type of character I'm looking for, as I start to develop, then I'm going to assign some specific qualities that are coming, that just seem to fit, that make that character more authentic and help me with the motivation of like what their behavior would be. So you will see pieces of people that I know or myself. I mean, and which, if you've seen my show, you can understand why my wife worried a little bit. But that's where it has to come from. There has to be something true in every character for me.
Any last questions? I think we're about out of time, right? Maybe time for one more, or yeah, one more.
What are you guys watching?
That's hilarious, because I'm actually, in my house, is because I'm sure this is probably true for all of us, if not most of us. It is very difficult to watch TV when you make TV. Like, you cannot, even when you want to, you do not have the time. So what I get is hits of TV as I'm walking through the living room and my kids are watching something, or my wife. HGTV if it's my wife, and if it's my kids, they're actually, thanks to streaming, they're watching all of these old shows. My one son had One Tree Hill on for like 24 hours a day for 2 weeks straight. And now they've moved on to The Office, which I completely missed when it was happening, so I'm actually getting little snippets here, and it's actually been fun to see. That show actually was as good as everybody was saying.
I somehow managed to not see a single episode of Mad Men. And then I was on a plane and I started watching it, and I watched the entire series in 3 weeks. Wow. And my wife said that it was going to end our marriage because, if you can imagine, I started drinking a lot more and I wanted to smoke. So it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Yeah.
I only watched Man in the High Castle and Bosch. That's it. No, it depends. My son and I watch Game of Thrones and other HBO stuff, and my wife and I were watching Night Manager, and we still haven't watched the final episode, so we've got to catch up with that.
Yeah, I'm currently deep on 7 shows, and they happen to be Hand of God, Goliath, Sneaky Pete, Man in the High Castle. It's really hard to find time to watch them. The one show that I have discovered a little bit later that I've really enjoyed and been carrying around on my iPad when I've been flying around a lot is Mr. Robot. It's a great show. So I think that's it, right? Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.